This past April, my mother called me for the first time in 15 years, not to apologize, to tell me she and my father deserved 30% of the 14 restaurants I built after they threw me out at 19. The same father who stood on our porch, crossed his arms, and laughed. "You'll be begging on the street," he said. "For 15 years I believed that porch was the worst thing my family ever did to me. I was wrong." Their lawsuit landed on my desk in May, and what I found buried in a 16-year-old courthouse file was darker than anything they did to me at 19. And the package I mailed my mother when it was over, she never saw that coming. I grew up in Creston Falls, Ohio, in a house where love had a bookkeeping system. My mother, Carol, taped grocery receipts to the fridge, split 3 ways in blue ink. My share was circled. My father, Gordon, ran a failing farm equipment store, and dinner had one lesson, served nightly. Nobody eats for free in this house. At 14, I got running shoes for track. I also got a line in Mom's notebook: "Shoes advanced against future contribution." By 15, I was washing dishes at a diner, half my paycheck going into the family fund. It wasn't poverty that made our house different. It was the accounting. Every kindness arrived with interest. But 6 blocks away, on Maple Court, there was a yellow kitchen where none of those rules existed. My grandmother, Rosemary Young, had cooked for 40 years. Church suppers, funeral lunches, the lunch counter at Hardin's before it closed. Everything she knew lived in one place. A fat notebook with a blue cloth cover, her slanted handwriting crowding every page. She never measured anything in front of me. She'd press my hands into the dough and say, "There, that's what ready feels like." My mother hated that kitchen. Called it the soup kitchen, said a woman who gave food away had no business lecturing anyone about money. I asked Grandma once why she never charged. She dusted flour off her hands and said, "We feed people because they're hungry, not because they can pay." I was 12. I thought it was a rule about pie. It took me 22 years in a courtroom to understand it was a rule about everything. Grandma's heart started failing when I was 16. I cooked while she directed from a kitchen chair, and those were the best afternoons of my life. One evening I came in through the back door and heard my mother's voice in the front room, bright and patient, the tone she used on bank tellers. "It's just paperwork, Mom. Sign it and I'll handle everything." Then my grandmother, thin as tissue but with iron underneath, "I already signed everything I mean to sign." I was 17. I thought they were talking about insurance. 6 weeks later, just before Christmas, Grandma put the blue notebook in my hands, wrapped in a dish towel like something warm from the oven. "This is yours," she said. "Keep it where she can't." She died February 9th, 2010. At the funeral lunch, my mother offered to keep the notebook safe at our house. I told her I'd already packed it away. First lie I ever told her, not the last time she'd ask. 16 months later, June 2011, my father's store was dying and everyone knew it. I was 19, out of community college for lack of money, waiting tables full-time. My parents called a family meeting. My father slid a loan application across the table, $40,000 to refinance the store, and they needed a cosigner with clean credit. Mine. Then my mother opened her notebook and turned it around. 19 years, itemized, diapers, braces, the running shoes, backdated to my 16th birthday. Total, underlined twice, $16,000. "We're not asking you for money," she said. "We're asking you to stand behind this family." I'd seen the empty shelves, the empty lot. Co-signing wasn't a rescue. It was a burial and the plot was mine. I said no. They gave me until Saturday. I left with 2 duffel bags, a shoebox of paperbacks, and my grandmother's notebook zipped inside my jacket. At the door my mother said, "When you're ready to contribute, you know the number." My father was the one on the porch. "You'll be begging on the street," he said, and laughed, small, dry, certain. "Give it 6 months. I slept in my '98 Corolla for 11 nights behind the Save lot, washed my hair in a gas station sink, wasn't late to a single shift. It was the only thing I had left to control, so I controlled it. On the 12th morning, someone knocked on my window. My Aunt Patty, holding an envelope in a dead woman's handwriting. Your grandmother gave me this in 2009, she said. Told me to hold it until you needed it most. I heard what happened. I'd say that's now. Inside was a payable on death account at First Merchant Bank, opened in 2009. Balance, $26,500. Beneficiary, Athena Young, not my father, not my mother, me. Folded around it, a torn half-sheet in that slanted hand, for flour, rent, and a start, not for anyone's debts. My grandmother had been dead 16 months, and she was still the only person taking care of me. She'd seen the lone folder coming before anyone opened it, and she'd hidden this from my parents through Patty. I claimed the account, opened my own at a different bank, rented a room over a hardware store, and started pricing used food trucks. Here's the part to hold on to. 15 years later, my parents would stand in a courtroom and swear under oath that everything I built had belonged to them all along. In 2013, I bought a gutted step van at auction for $11,000. Painted it butter yellow, lettered the side by hand, Rosemary's Table. 5 recipes from the Blue Notebook, rescaled and retimed for a lunch rush. The biscuits alone took 40 tries. Opening day, I sold 19 orders and drove home with $61 in a cigar box, laughing on the floor of my rented room. Winter nearly finished me. By January 2014, the crowds were gone and my generator died, $600 I didn't have. I sat with the notebook and did the arithmetic of quitting. Then I found a page, dog-eared long before it was mine, a margin note under the pot pie recipe. For cold days, feed them first. So I made 40 pot pies and gave them away free at the bus stop where the night shift plant workers waited in the dark. My last flour, my last butter for nothing. 6 days it looked insane. On the 7th, there was a line. Pot Pie Thursday carried that truck through every winter after. One gray afternoon, a man in a Carhartt jacket finished his pie and offered me his diner building on the east side of Columbus. Seller finance terms no bank would ever give me. Earl Dressler. I signed in March 2015, 22 years old, hands shaking so hard I dated the signature wrong. I built fast and hard after that. In 2016, I hired Jess Morin, the best decision I ever made. One night, watching me recount an already counted drawer, she said, "We're not broke. You run this place like you're paying off a debt nobody can see." I laughed it off. I didn't listen. It would take 10 more years to understand whose ledger I was still working from. That Christmas, a card arrived from Creston Falls. No letter. Just under the printed greeting, "We hear the restaurant is doing well. It would be nice if you remembered where you came from. Your father's shop closed because you refused to help." 5 years of silence, and that was the flag they planted. I wrote a 6-page reply, read it back, heard how it sounded like an invoice, and burned it. No contact, not out of hate, out of arithmetic. I'd stopped being able to afford her. The years moved fast after that. A second location in 2016, 4 by 2018, family meal boxes carrying the company through the pandemic. By 2024, there were 12 restaurants. By early 2026, 340 people on payroll, and a suspended meal board by every register. Buy a meal for a stranger, no questions. Not branding, a rule about pie. In 2023, I paid off Earl's building 3 years early and mailed him a photo of the deed with a pot pie. He mailed back a napkin. "Proud of you, kid." I framed it. And still, every January, I ran the company's numbers alone, twice, like somebody was going to check my math. Then in March 2026, a magazine called. Ohio Business Monthly wanted a profile, 14 restaurants, 1 grandmother's notebook. I said yes, partly for her. They photographed me at the pass window holding the notebook open, 1 biscuit-stained page filling the frame. A Columbus news station picked it up. It traveled. It reached Creston Falls by dinner time. Before my mother's call ever came, the notebook had one more thing to tell me. The filming had worn the spine thin, so I took it to a book conservator named Ruth. 4 days later she called, strange care in her voice. "Did you know there's something inside the back cover?" Stitched flat against the cardboard was a manila envelope, and on the front, in that handwriting, "For the day they come for this." Inside, a letter dated October 2009. The same fall I'd overheard, "It's just paperwork," in the hallway. It listed everywhere my grandmother's handwriting lived, a map of her own hand left on purpose. And at the bottom, 3 lines I've memorized like a prayer. "Carol asked me twice to sign papers about my recipes. I never signed. If a paper ever says I did, it lies." I put it in the flagship safe and told exactly one person, nobody. 9 days later, my phone lit up with a word I deleted a decade ago. "Mom, we've seen the article," she said. "We think 30% is fair." She said Rosemary's Food belonged to the family, that I'd been selling it 13 years without a phone call. I reminded her she put me on the street with 2 bags. She didn't miss a beat. "We taught you independence, look what you did with it." Then the line she'd clearly rehearsed, "Everything you are, you owe to this family." "No," I said. "Everything I am, someone in this family gave me free. You've never once been on the right side of that." I hung up. The following Friday, a process server walked into the flagship at lunch rush. "Gordon and Carol Young, plaintiffs versus me and my company. Unjust enrichment, constructive trust." And the spine of it, exhibit, a codicil to my grandmother's will, dated November 3rd, 2009, leaving all recipes and notebooks to my father. Recently discovered in a box of the deceased's belongings. November 2009. The same month I heard, "Sign it," in a hallway. The same fall my grandmother sewed a map into a book cover. I hired Dana Whitfield, the best probate litigator in Columbus. She read the complaint in 10 minutes. Weak law, recipes aren't property, and a 16-year-old codicil surfacing 3 weeks after a TV segment is the kind of coincidence judges notice. "This is an expensive nuisance," she said. "They're betting you'll pay to make it stop." Then she looked at the signature on Exhibit A for a long time and asked the strangest question of my life. "Did your grandmother send Christmas cards?" The 2010 probate file was clean, a plain 2-page will from 1998, properly witnessed. No codicil anywhere. To reopen a closed estate after 16 years, my parents' lawyer had claimed it was just found in an attic box. That's when I put my grandmother's sewn-in letter on Dana's desk. She read the last 3 lines twice, set the page down like it was evidence and china at once. "Your grandmother is about to testify." We gathered her piece by piece, 20 years of letters to Patty, church ledgers, a signature card from First Merchant, a forensic document examiner, Dr. Meredith Acaffer, spent 3 weeks with it all before showing us the truth on a monitor. The codicil signature was a point-for-point match. Not similar, identical, to one specific signature on a 2003 Christmas card that had sat in my parents' photo album for 2 decades. "No 2 genuine signatures are identical," she said. "That doesn't happen in nature. That happens on a light table with patience. Under magnification, hesitation marks, a pencil ghost beneath the ink." One witness on the codicil had died 2 years before the date he supposedly watched her sign. The other was my mother's card game friend of 30 years. My mother hadn't found my grandmother's signature. She traced it, grown a dead woman's hand out of an old Christmas card. Before we could use any of it, we had to know what my father actually believed. We deposed him in July. He told it straight and smooth. Carol found the box in the attic. Carol brought him the codicil. He recognized his mother's signature like a voice on the phone. When he said it, something rose in his face I hadn't expected. Pride. Relief. At 65, here at last was proof his mother had chosen him. He didn't just believe it was real. He needed it to be. That night, a settlement offer arrived. Drop everything for $200,000, mutual confidentiality, sealed forever. Framed as a goodwill gesture toward healing. I sat at my kitchen table until 2 in the morning and very nearly took it. All I had to do was pay one bill I didn't owe and keep one secret forever. Then I read my grandmother's letter again. If a paper ever says I did, it lies. She hadn't asked me to win. She'd asked me not to let the lie stand. I called Dana in the morning. File the report. Carol's deposition was the last Tuesday of July. She walked in with fresh lipstick, still holding the ledger in her head. 40 minutes of soft questions built her own scaffold. The attic, October, no prior discussion of recipes with Rosemary, who wasn't an easy woman, but knew what family means. Then Dana laid the 2003 Christmas card beside the codicil, transparency over transparency, and slid it across the table. Can you explain how your mother-in-law signed her name twice, 6 years apart, identical down to the pen stroke? My mother looked past Dana, straight down the table at me. Not guilt, not fear. Fury, the fury of a bookkeeper whose numbers had stopped obeying her. Her lawyer's hand closed on her arm and called for a recess. In the scramble, my father reached across the abandoned table and picked up the overlay with both hands. He held it to the light a long time. Then, quietly to my mother, "Carol, where did you get my mother's Christmas card?" Nobody answered him. Their lawyer offered us the hallway deal within the hour, dismissal, our fees covered, in exchange for burying the report and sealing the record forever. Everything I'd wanted since the process server found me at lunch rush, laid out on a bench. All I had to do was help bury my grandmother's signature a second time. Through the glass I could see my father alone, still holding the overlay, reading it over and over. 65 years old, hungry his whole life for one sentence from his mother, holding proof the only version he'd ever gotten was counterfeit. I heard her voice. We feed people because they're hungry. The truth was the only thing left to put in front of him, and it was going to taste like ash, and it was still food. No seal, I told Dana. No confidentiality. The report stays in the record. Dismissal with prejudice, they pay your fees, and no criminal referral. I'm not sending my mother to be prosecuted. Somebody in this family has to be the first one to stop collecting. They took it because there was nothing left to take. Before the papers were even signed, my father picked up a pen and withdrew as a plaintiff on the spot, his hand shaking so hard the court reporter looked away. My mother hissed his name once. He didn't look at her. On his way out, he stopped in front of me, smelling like machine oil and peppermint. "I said you'd beg," he said. "I know," I said. He made himself look at me. "You never did." No apology, men like him weren't issued the parts for one, but the first time in my life he'd looked at me like a person instead of a balance. The case was dismissed with prejudice in August. 3 weeks later my mother called again. "Your father moved out," she said, no hello. "He filed papers." 42 years, Athena. She wanted me to feel it, and then, inevitably, the ledger reasserted itself. The least you can do is acknowledge we still deserve something. 30% of nothing is nothing. Be reasonable. Her husband gone, her name in the paper next to the word forged, and she was still billing me. I didn't feel angry. I felt finished, the specific quiet of a long shift ending, the last burner clicking off. "Check your mailbox," I said, and hung up. I'd mailed it the day the dismissal came through. Inside a plain envelope, the complete forensic report, every page, because the truth was the one debt I actually owed her. A copy of my grandmother's sewn-in letter, the bottom lines included. And on top, a recipe card in my own handwriting, chicken pot pie, complete. Nothing held back, because once, a lifetime ago, my mother had eaten that pie at a yellow kitchen table and said, without an invoice attached, "That's wonderful." The only free thing I ever heard her give my grandmother. At the bottom of the card I wrote what I'd finally figured out. No invoice. It was never for sale. It was always free. That's the part you never understood. She hasn't called since. Patty went by that fall to collect the last of my father's tools and told me the fridge was bare, no receipts. No blue ink, nothing but one thing pinned dead center with a magnet. The pot pie recipe card. My father lives in Patty's spare room now. Once a month he drives to the flagship, sits at the counter, and orders the pot pie. He pays every time. I've told him it's free. He leaves the money under the plate anyway, and I've stopped fighting it, because I finally understand what it is. It's the only language he has, and he's using it to say something he can't. We don't talk much. We start with silence and work up from there. Some months, that's a kind of peace. Zanesville opened the week before Thanksgiving with a line out the door. And on the first Sunday of every month, at all 14 Rosemary's tables, we run what the staff calls Rosemary Sunday, a long table down the middle, no register, no tickets. Anyone who's hungry. Last Sunday, I was teaching biscuits to my newest hire, 19 years old, sleeping on a cousin's couch since his folks put him out in March. His first batch came out like hockey pucks, and he braced like he was waiting for a bill. I pressed his hands into the next batch the way she once pressed mine. We feed people because they're hungry, I told him, not because they can pay. His shoulders came down an inch. Somewhere, a ledger closed. Here's what my grandmother knew all along. Love that keeps a ledger always ends up in court. Love given freely keeps feeding people long after you're gone. 2 duffel bags on a June porch. A letter sewn into a book cover. A mailbox with no check in it. If someone in your life ever made you feel like a debt instead of a daughter, the only thing you truly owe anyone is the truth.